So really quickly before we get started, we're going to do a shout out to our sponsors for 401 Gives 2025. We have a lot of generous corporate partners this year, as well as some in-kind donors. So we have Pepito Opportunity Connection, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Rhode Island Foundation, Rhode Island Energy, Cox Communication, Centerville Bank, Coastal One, Muse Foundation, KLR, and then a handful of some in-kind donors. We officially have more prize money there this year than we have in previous years, and that's all thanks to our sponsors. And you'll be able to see those prizes by the end of this week on the website. So looking forward to that piece. On the agenda for today, we have some storytelling strategies. We have a little bit of conversation around your 401 Gives profile. We're going to be talking about some online engagement and storytelling pieces, some key takeaway and resources, and then there will of course be time for some Q&A. This training is also going to be recorded and it will be put up on the website. So if you have to hop off at all, or if you have a colleague or a friend that missed this training, they will be able to view it at a later time. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about some storytelling strategies, and I wanted to start off by giving Maria Elena some time to really introduce herself and talk about what inspired her to become a storyteller and how that shaped her personal journey in this experience. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So, all right, I was thinking of how to start this. Basically, I have a master's degree in health communication, and when I finished that degree, I was fortunate enough to be hired to be in a communications role at the Department of Health in Rhode Island. So, Rhode Island Department of Health. I had several positions. I ended up being the spokesperson for the Department of Health. So what was I doing there was basically telling the stories of what we were doing as a department, what emergencies, you have to catch people's attention. If you don't catch their attention, they're not going to listen to the things that you're wanting them to do to keep themselves healthy, right? Vaccination, all kinds of prevention. So I did that for a while until I had twins. Then I stayed home for a while. I was very fortunate to be able to stay home for a while. And when my kids started to go to school, then I figured, okay, what can I do with my communications degree that still helps people and doesn't take me, out of the house full time? So I got a real estate license and I helped people achieve their dream of home ownership for about 10 years. And I really was focused on the communities of color, especially Spanish-speaking communities, who would find some of those individuals found it very hard to make this kind of transaction happen because they were not comfortable doing it in a language other than Spanish. So I felt that I could help there, and that was very satisfying. After that, at some point during that time, COVID, the pandemic started, and I got all kinds of anxiety watching, the communities that were disproportionately affected, the communities of color, the Hispanic communities, the Black communities, all the communities that, and I could tell when people were intimating that, this was maybe affecting different communities because genetics. I said, no, 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 no. This is a matter of communication. This is a matter of lack of education and lack of access and lack of resources. And so I approached one of the TV stations, and eventually we started what was the first 100% Spanish language program, which is Doce Informa. And Doce Informa aimed to inform, to make sure that people knew what resources existed and connect them with them. So I did that for a while, and after that I was very fortunate to be hired as it was actually posted as brand storyteller. That was a bait and switch a little bit.
Yep.
But I was hired as brand storyteller, which is wonderful. I said, oh, when I saw that title, I said, I have to get that job. And after that, the title switched a little bit, but basically what I'm doing is helping the United Way by being manager of brand voice, helping the United Way shape the story, shape the language, shape the way that the public sees us, and help tell those stories. That's a long way to answer the question, but I hope that helps you.
That was great. You can tell that Maria Elena is a storyteller and a writer because she always talks with the pen in her hand. You will always see that pen in her hand.
That's true.
So it's without a doubt that there's significance in storytelling, and it promotes active listening and participation. It lays a foundation for your organization's big picture. There's context and clear calls to actions that are provided. It's empowering your supporters to be a part of that story and mission, and getting them involved in what you do. And it's even more significant in this digital era. And so, Maria Elena, how do you keep your audiences, our audiences at United Way and in the Alliance and all of our programs, engaged and emotionally invested throughout your stories? Are there specific tips and tricks that you can share, or is it just kind of this mindset that you get into?
Yeah, I think that, the emotional hook is what keeps people engaged, but the really important thing is to make sure that you're not exploiting the stories and the individuals that you are, fortunate and privileged to tell the story about. You have to make sure that people are fully informed of what you're wanting to do with the story, which channels you will use, where they might see themselves, what kinds of um, just specific things that you're going to do with these stories. This is not, these stories tend to be personal, they tend to be, people are emotionally invested, and sometimes people can be put in danger actually when you expose the details of their story they're sharing. So once you have, you might have to change their names if that's more comfortable for them. You might have to obscure their likeness or use a different image that's not theirs. And once you have permission to do this, obviously, if there's any children involved, you have to have absolute written informed consent for everything. But always, always for children, right? So basically, what you want to do is, first of all, know your audience, understand what you're trying to convey, what the call to action is. Like Katie says, is you need to know exactly what you're trying to get them to do so that you can break down any barriers in advance. So if they have an objection, if they have, a question, why should I give to this? The emotional connection needs to be there. That's how what hooks someone into the story. But they need to believe in something. They need to believe in what you're telling them. You need to paint them a picture and let them understand, help them understand why it is important that they do this thing that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you were touching on a little bit is also the curation of your story. So knowing who you're inspiring, and maybe that's beneficiaries, volunteers, donors, staff, community members. It could be internal, external, because storytelling is not always for your external audience. Sometimes you need to kind of pump up your staff and the people that you work with every day. And then you also have some themes that you need to think about. And there's across the board a bunch of themes that you could grab. You can talk about your founding, your focus, impact, people's strengths, future, the things that you do well and the things that you do every day. Um, and so, another question back to you: how do you go about deciding the tone and language of a piece that can still reach a diverse audience? Once you figured out kind of who you're talking to and what you're talking about, there's still that written piece. And so, what does that process look like for you?
Absolutely. To reach a diverse audience, you really need to, and really to reach almost any audience, I would contend, you really have to make the piece as understandable and simple as you can. The closer your language is to common normal conversational English, the more likelihood that you will engage these people and they will do the thing that you want them to do. When you approach a written piece with a lot of technical terms and jargon, that's going to lose people at some point. So simple, short, to the point. And yes, if it's a donor, you want to be talking about what their impact is doing, why, their gift is important, what that gift will allow us to do, how it will help the community. And they're going to feel good about those things. So it's all about you. When it's just more general audience, you still want to be have a simple conversation with them. It has to be very easy to understand and very clear. If you have data, paint a picture of how the thing that you're wanting them to do, the donation, donating their time, whatever it is, volunteering, how this will help the community, and eventually they will feel good about it. So basically, Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Katie? Yeah.
absolutely.
All right,
I
good.
think a lot of the times we get stuck in our profession speak, so using abbreviations and lingo that like just may not
No
make
acronyms.
sense
No
to
acronyms.
somebody else. And we need to make sure that we're communicating in a clear way that allows
You're
people
right.
to feel engaged in a conversational way.
Exactly.
Um, and so there's a couple of different ways that we can do this, and that's with prompts. We're thinking about how we want to write about what we want to write about. And so there's a people story. It's told from the perspective of a current employee, volunteer, or supporter. That could look like, how did you get involved with this organization? What impact did you have on the organization or the organization has on you? And then what impact does your work with the organization have on the larger community? So you're kind of looking at the different scales and the different levels of engagement. We can also think about a focus story. So this isn't necessarily your mission statement, but it's a story built around your mission statement. So what services do you provide and who's being empowered by them? How are services delivered and how do you reach those audiences? And what are the outcomes of these services? We used to do something here at United Way called Points of Pride, where once a month we would all get together in the conference room and we would have a pizza party, and we would just go around and share stories about the ways that we were engaging in whoever our target audience is. So for the Alliance, it was nonprofits. For 211, it was people in the community. And that way, marketing, Maria Elena and her team could take those stories and kind of evolve them into what they needed to be. Um, I also know of other nonprofits that do staff newsletters or they kind of train their folks on how to get those stories. And so making sure that you have these spaces to share those internal pieces are really good, not only for 401 Gives, but for your overall engagement strategies. And then we can also talk about impact stories. So these are the before and after tales of beneficiaries who have felt the direct impact of your organization and its mission. So kind of what we were talking about before, but more, I think it touches a little bit more emotions. So, telling us about your life before you worked with our organization, what led you to reach our organization. Do you remember any specific individuals you worked with or programs you participated in? What does your life look like after working with us? And what are you looking forward to in the future? Because we know that our work in nonprofits doesn't just stop on the day that somebody provides a service, it's also everything that comes after that as well. And so, Maria Elena, you were talking about this a little bit before when like protecting identities and all of these things, but storytelling often involves vulnerability in those moments. We saw it here in Points of Pride. We had many moments where we were shedding tears with each other. And so, how do you navigate moments of personal storytelling versus crafting those stories for others?
I think as long as we approach everything, the whole process with respect and humanity, and just understanding that these are real people, and having empathy, I think that you can come up with you can land on a place that is still emotionally impactful, but really respectful of what the person experienced, and sometimes as a journalist, you don't go back and check if the person likes the way you wrote the story, but this is different. This is if this is a client of yours, if this is a person who with whom you have connection, and their personal story and how this might affect them positively or negatively, you really have to be sensitive and work with them. You're not, again, it's not exploitative. This process should never feel exploitative for the individuals who are allowing you to use their stories.
Yeah. I like that piece that you're talking about, not taking advantage of folks and not exploiting them. I think there was a narrative that was written for a long time where we have to exchange our trauma for a good or
No,
our
no,
trauma
no.
for a donation. And I like that we're rewriting that story a little bit and really protecting people's peace.
And if you can focus on the success of, your organization, the initiatives, the interventions, whatever you're doing, focus on that success. Show the success stories, and that's less traumatic and more, and in some ways more inspirational than just, the trauma
Yeah,
story.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So, moving back into kind of a 401 Gives framework, you should have an asset checklist when you're building your profile, when you're thinking about storytelling, but also you can use these engagement tools outside of just 401 Gives because these are only 2 days that happen in the year and we have to engage our audiences 365 days a year. So, when we think about images, you want about 5 to 10 photos of your mission in action. So, when you look at these photos, you can tell what's going on. You can probably link it back to a program. These are pictures that are going to inspire people to do something that's related to what's happening. But in addition to that, you can also have some stock photos that encapsulate your mission. We know that sometimes we don't get the best photos of everything all of the time, especially when we're looking at staff sizes that are a little bit smaller. And so stock photos can come in really handy there. We also want to look at videos and hosting your videos on YouTube or Vimeo for easy sharing. We want easy access to the public to see the work that you're doing. And on a 401 Give scope, there's an ability to add thank you videos to your donations or when you accept donations. And I think it's really a cute addition to your profile to add in a thank you video of you and your staff or you and your board members thanking that donor. And we all know in a digital era, people love to watch something than they do to read something sometimes. And so that's a little bit of a different caveat there. And then infographics, so highlighting donor impact data and testimonials as well. We see this a lot when we look at social spaces like Instagram, LinkedIn. Being able to visualize your data is way more accessible for an audience versus having to read an impact report. So again, we're going to talk about our 401 Gives profile for a little bit. So a perfect profile checklist looks like a logo and a cover photo, an authentic and up-to-date story, goals that are displayed prominently, clear calls to action, additional visual content featured, and donation levels with images and descriptions. When you update your story section, you want to add the following. So, that cover photo that we were talking about, that monetary goal, and a story with text, images, and a video. If you're participating in 401 Gives every year, make sure that you change this year to year. We see some profiles that keep sort of a stagnant story that's a general landscape. And it's not necessarily a bad practice, but donors love to see what you're doing in real time. And so if they can go to your profile and see a new thing every year, they're going to stay engaged versus kind of knowing what's coming. We also see that a lot of profiles do good when they're asking for specific things. So, giving an overall general tell of your nonprofit is good, but also that's what a mission statement could possibly be before or a vision. We see nonprofits who put a profile together that's asking for a specific ask around a bench they're trying to build, or they're trying to relocate, maybe they're an animal shelter, or they're looking to build a certain program. When donors know exactly what they're giving to and they can see that displayed in a concise paragraph, they're more likely to engage with those profiles. And so, Maria Lee and I have a question for you. What are your strategies for distilling complex or detailed stories into a short and compelling narrative that still conveys the core message? There's not a lot of space on a 401 Gives profile, to sometimes shrink everything together is tough. So, what does that process look like for you?
I know the pain of having so much information to share and having to distill it. But basically, you write, you draft, and then you cut it in half, and then you cut it in half again. You really should start with, whatever, put all the core information in there. Use 1 to 3 data points that you will keep in there. Make sure that you make them into a graphic or something. Well, like Katie was saying, a visual representation is very powerful. Images, photographs are great. Paint a picture with your words, but really do be ruthless with your editing, and have a clear call to action, and make sure that the contact information that you're listing is correct. Please email that, no, click on the link, make sure that the email is going, that it's not broken, and keep it the shorter you can keep it and still keep the core information in there, the more effective your story will be.
When you're in those spaces where you're trying to cut down a story, do you find it's more helpful to try and sit and do it in one shot, or are you a person that puts it down and then comes back to it?
Well, if you let me edit, I will edit forever. So at some point you have to stop. But no, I do a first pass with everything that I think is important, and then I have to go back. I don't know if it's necessarily. Yeah, maybe it's once right away and then come back later with fresh eyes, because after some time we just and the thing is, when we write these things, we get attached to them emotionally, and we can't be emotional about the writing, because what needs to be conveyed is the story, and excess words don't help the story.
Yeah, absolutely. This slide is just a short piece on the formatting of your story section. Everybody who's in attendance to this presentation, as well as this being on the website, will have access to this slide, so I'm not going to go over each thing that's on here. But this just talks about the little widgets that you have in that story formatting section. If you have any trouble or you're struggling with this, you can reach out to myself at 401Gives at United Way, or you can reach out to the customer support team at GiveGab and they'll start to walk you through those sections as well. They have great support pieces as well as the trainings that we do. So if you get stuck, you're not stuck forever, I promise. Um, there's also a piece around highlighting visual content. So, like Maria Elena was saying, let images tell a story about your work. If you don't have any good quality images, ask your staff, volunteers, and supporters to submit theirs. We've had a couple of like written trainings and also in person about like how to take a good picture and what works well for your audiences. And again, using stock images that represent your organization. But most likely, if you have an event, at least one person will have taken one picture. And so try and track those pictures down that you can use in these spaces. You also have access to suggested donation amounts. We always encourage nonprofits to use these. And so these help donors understand the impact of their gift by suggesting a donation amount. You want to identify $3 to $4 amounts that suggest what they could be giving to, determine what each can support, and then you can add an image and description for each and connect these to your story. So, if you are an animal shelter and you're looking to relocate or build a secondary site, you want your donation levels to report back to something. So, maybe it's how to buy a kennel, it's buying dog food, it's buying toys. You're not going to talk about relocating and then asking for something that's completely different. And so, make sure that donors feel engaged all the way from your story to the moment that they hit checkout. And also, make sure that your giving levels are within donor capacity. So, you know your donors. Um, and in a time where it's a quick donation, these aren't something that you're prospecting out. What are your donors more likely to give? If you have donors that are likely to give $100, then ask for $100. If you have donors that in one click are more likely to give between 5 to 20, then set up that range instead. You want it to be the most accessible as possible for your audiences. And then setting your goals. Goals are hard to set. Sometimes we want to be really ambitious, but we want to make sure that we're also attainable at the same time. And so determine 1 to 3 specific goals that focus during 401 Gives. Group these by internal and external goals. So you want to highlight your external goals in your profile, in your story, and on social media. And you can find more information about goal setting on the trainings page. We have an entire section for it. And just as an example, an internal goal is becoming more familiar with online fundraising tools, strengthening relationships with board members or volunteers or staff. And an external example looks like raising $5,000 or $1,000, things that your audiences are going to do for you. Um, we want to be really careful when we're doing goal setting. If you know over the past years that you have raised upwards of $4,000, you don't want to all of a sudden come out with a $15,000 goal. It can feel really ambitious, but donors love when they're able to help you actually reach those goals or when they're actually able to check off those goals. So there's a few veterans of 401 Gives that will do the same $3,000, $5,000 goal, and then they're asking their supporters to help them double it once they've already reached that goal on social media. Or we have nonprofits that then reach their goal and help fundraise for other nonprofits. And so make sure that it's something that's really attainable for you and your donors and your organization. So now we're going to switch over to online engagement and storytelling.
Katie, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
I forgot to make a point. You also have to tell your audience what's in it for them. So yes, they're gonna feel great, but is their donation tax deductible? Is there when are you offering goods or services that are gonna have a large ripple effect on the community, a positive ripple effect? You want to talk about that? Are you saving taxpayers' dollars by, when they give their gift and they allow you to give this service, then what happens? Anything that's positive, anything that's going to make them feel good, anything that helps them financially or otherwise, fiscally, just mention it too. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Not all giving is altruistic, and that's okay. Sometimes people need to know what they're going to get out of it as well.
Mhm.
So talking about online engagement and storytelling. So another checklist for you. So with online engagement, you want to finalize your goals and story for 401 Gives. Decide which online platforms work best for you and your organization and supporters. This usually looks like, are you going to focus most of your attention on Instagram or are you going to focus most of your attention on Facebook? You want to obviously complete your 401 Gives profile. This is around the time that nonprofits and donors are kind of going into the site and looking around, and so you want to have sort of a completed outline of your profile. You want to develop a weekly communications plan leading up to 401 Gives. So, where are you posting? What are you posting? And how often are you posting? We know that donors get fatigued really easily. And so, being really strategic about you and your audience that you're engaging with. And then divide tasks amongst staff, volunteers, and board members. Um, Not all nonprofits are large as in staffing capacity, so these are great tasks for board members and volunteers. People love to be part of something large, and this is certainly something large. And so divide up tasks as much as you can and as much as is appropriate. Be active on social media. This is a social online campaign, so you got to be a little active on social media. And again, identifying those social platforms that work best for you and your audiences, posting regularly leading up to 401 Gives and on 401 Gives, encouraging that engagement, that clear call to action. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And when are they doing it? And then posting a variety of content, not just 401 Gives announcements or donation solicitations. 401 Gives is a day to engage your donors monetarily, absolutely, but it's also a way to set them up for the future as well. And so if you can gain that audience through 401 Gives and you can get those online followers, you want to keep them engaged for the next 401 Gives, for your next event, for your end of year solicitations. This is an opportunity to get new donors and old donors re-engaged into your organization and always using visual content whenever possible. Incorporating your story into all of that. So using social media and or email. Email is always an option, newsletters, but we know that donors have a lot in their inbox on 401 Gives, and so as much as you can split that up in between a newsletter and a social post is best. But you're reaching an audience. Split up your story into smaller pieces to tell in installments leading up to 401 Gives. We love a cliffhanger. That's how we watch TV. That's how TV shows keep us engaged, is they leave us on something for next week, and you can do the same with 401 Gives. Using images and videos as much as possible to convey your point, reminding your audience when and where they can support 401 Gives, clear calls to actions, and always making sure that you can link your profile. What Marina Elena was talking about, make sure your links work because when your links don't work, people get frustrated and sometimes they don't always return. Um, and so, Maria Elena, in your experience, and this is a little bit in your realm and not in your realm, and so I'm more thinking about Informa in this space. How has social media and digital storytelling changed the way that we share news, and what best practices do you follow to maximize engagement? Ooh, you're muted.
Sorry. My dog was snoring, so I didn't want to bother. Yeah, social media is closer to what we used to do with teasers, pretty much. So if you don't grab people's attention within 3 seconds, they are clicking away. There are so much content out there that they can click away to. Attention spans are shorter than ever. And you just really need to grab them visually. The words have to be clear, concise. You don't have a full minute to grab their attention. They will be gone. So it has to be to the point. It has to be quick. It has to be, it just catchy, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I know myself, being a Gen Zer, being on social media all day, especially in the rise of TikTok, I watched my attention span go down. But I also watched news outlets, nonprofits, just kind of any social media place that shares news get really creative in their engagement strategies and the way that they create things. And also, nonprofits have free access to Canva, and you can create those types of images on Canva. And so I think that we're also in a space where we're trying to have a little bit more fun with the stuff that we share on socials, especially as we're sharing kind of heavy news every so often. And so don't be afraid to try things and get creative where you can. Especially with 401 Gives. We give you the free takeaway to do whatever you want with 401 Gives. That's a space where you can have a lot of fun. And so really quickly, we're going to go through and talk about resources and takeaways, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So, resources for success. You have a nonprofit toolkit. It is linked on here. It's linked on the website. It involves some email samples and social media post samples. There are social graphics for 401 Gives that can be customized, as well as an engagement toolkit for 2025. It all exists on Canva and some Google Docs or Google Drive folders. Um, there's some communication timelines and checklists that you can follow. And of course, we have trainings. You're in one right now that will be recorded and posted. But also, as you do 401 Gives year after year, You learn what works best. There is no one solution. I think that it's similar in storytelling. There's no one way to tell a story, and there's no one way to write, and there's no one way to do 401 Gives. So try things, be creative, do what you can where you can, and ultimately have fun. If you are having fun, your donors will have fun, your volunteers will have fun, and people will be more likely to re engage with you. Some key takeaways. Storytelling is a key part of your 401 Gives participation. Donors have to know what they're giving to and why they're giving to you. Stories that donors can personally relate to will be more impactful than just facts and figures. That's why we're talking about specific asks. We're talking about what programs you're doing. If you just share who you are as a nonprofit, that's great. But in that 36-hour period, you have small windows to catch people's attention. Using your 401 Gives profile to tie together your story, your goal, and other details to engage donors. Make sure it's succinct, make sure it makes sense. Everything should tie together in a nice, neat package. If you're looking at your profile and you feel that some things are all over the place, re strategize and regroup. Communicate your story across channels. What you're sharing on Instagram, you should share on Facebook, you should share on LinkedIn. Make sure that those stories are, again, the same so people are getting the same information, but share it as wide as you can. And of course, use that nonprofit toolkit. Um, so now we have time for questions. This was about a 30-minute presentation, so we'll use whatever remaining time we have for questions, and then maybe we'll end early today. You're welcome to toss your questions into the chat or come off mute if you'd like. While we're letting people kind of think and meander in this space, are there any final thoughts that you wanted to share, Marilyn, about storytelling?
Just about, the power of the story. Power of the storytelling is, it can do everything for you. It can make it or break it literally for your campaigns. So if you can share those stories, and if you have clients in your organization whose stories are too sensitive to share, share your own story. Share your own story about, like Katie was saying, how did you get involved in this? Oh, how does it feel to work for this organization? What kind of satisfaction do you derive from it? That's also an important story that you can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And partnership stories. I mean, we know that nonprofits do not work alone in this space. And so if there's something that you're doing with a partner, if you're resource sharing, if you are engaging in the same type of success at the same time, like get together to tell your stories together and do that writing process together. I think it can be really fruitful when we join forces in those ways instead of working in these silos, because none of this work is done alone. Um,
It's also okay, Katie. Yes, yes. And it's also okay to talk about the challenges that we're facing right now. It
yeah.
is also okay.
Absolutely. There's a lot of connectedness in struggle, especially right now. And people can sometimes feel like that struggle is just theirs. And so when they can see that it's not just theirs, it also feels easier to join forces and to do something about it. Absolutely. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, which means that this was just maybe a really good training. Oh, there we go. Is 401 Gives running to April 2nd this year? And if so, what time is the end time? It is running until April 2nd, so it's 36 hours. So it will start April 1st at 6 a.m. and it will close April 2nd at 6 p.m. You're welcome. I think that if there's no more questions, time is ever so precious in this nonprofit community. Is there a recommended word count? Ooh, that's a good one. Maria?
For you, Kate, well, I don't know what the setup is for 401 Gives profiles.
Let me check. And then in the meantime, Maria, Elena, do you pay attention to word count?
I pay attention to word count depending on, what I'm producing. Sometimes I'm putting together a report that's 8 pages long, and sometimes I have, 250 words that I can I can use. So it just depends on the medium, on the channel, and the objective. But
Yeah.
I would say anything under 500 words is there, you have a good chance that people, if you really grab them, will read through the end. Oh, also remember, when you write, for example, when we write for newspapers, we write in inverted pyramid style. So you want to do that too. You want to write the most important, the core thing at the top, And you are going to be losing some people as they read through, so make sure they see the most important thing at the top, and then the details at the bottom. Whoever's really really interested will get to the end, and there's a better chance that they get to the end if you grab them with the core message in the front.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no word count on the 401 Gives
Oh, I
story
would say
formatting. Go ahead.
stay under 400, 500. That's plenty.
Yeah. Um, One of the tools that, or not tools, I guess the thought process that we use when we're making email newsletters as well is how many scrolls is it going to take? So your
Mhm.
scrollability of your page. So once you write that story on 401 Gives, look at it both on your phone and on a desktop and see how many scrolls it's taking to get through. If you're hitting almost kind of more than like one and a half, then you probably need to cut some stuff down. So not so much word count, but aesthetically how it's looking on that page,
And
especially when,
sorry, Katie, that's probably closer to 250, 300. It's not
yeah,
more. Yeah,
it's
it's
not
very,
a lot.
very short. Yeah.
Especially when we're looking at like bolded words and the size font that you're using, because there's a lot of room to aesthetically play around in the 401 Gives story formatting. So see kind of how much you can capture in one glance and then what you're missing and what you need to add in. Do we have any other questions? What about matches this year or donor? Our donors love the matches. We do have matches this year. So we have $50,000 from Rhode Island Foundation, and then we have $25,000 from Rhode Island Energy. And those will all be up on the website by the end of this week so that you can start talking to your donors and teasing them out and getting ready for those. But yes, we absolutely have the matches and the prizes for sure. Anything else? I'll give it the awkward 3-second pause. Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you. Oh, see, we got one at the last second. For those of us who are new to 401 Gives, is there anything we should specifically know for a first time out of the gate? Don't, this sounds counterintuitive, but don't try and do everything all at once. So there is a huge capability on 401 Gives for the amount of things that you can do for your profile, the amount of asks that you can do. Make it a targeted ask for a program that you're building. Make your goal very attainable so that your donors feel good when they complete that goal. Make sure you have exciting images, a good story, which we talked about today, and make sure that you're starting those communications now to get your donors engaged. If you're a nonprofit that's never interacted with 401 Gives before, that means that some of your donors may not have interacted with 401 Gives before. And so that could also look like telling them how to give with infographics, giving them those links really, really early on, sending out some newsletters, making social posts, but target what you can do and what you can do well, and then you can try and expand year after year. Is there a recommended number of times we should post on socials or emails throughout the day? So, when it comes to email newsletters, you should probably send out only 2 to 3. Three's pushing it a little bit. Donors get a lot of email newsletters in their inbox on those days. I would post more. Oh, I have a stress ball in my hand. I would post more on the social sides, and so posting every couple of hours, keeping your donors engaged. If you have certain matches and prizes that you're trying to hit, make posts at those times or leading up to those times to tell your donors what's coming and how they can get engaged. But I would focus more on the social side than I would on the email newsletter side or breaking up your audiences. So we know that donors who are a little bit on the older side may prefer an email newsletter versus your younger donors may prefer a social post. And so kind of carving out that audience for that day to see who's going to be best reached what way. That was a good question too. Yeah, you're welcome. You are all also welcome to ask these questions at any time. You can send them into the 401 Gives inbox over email and we'll respond to you. We also offer one-to-one technical assistance meetings as you need them with you and your team. So you're welcome to reach out for those meetings at any time as well. So thank you again, Maria Elena, for your
Thank
time
you.
today.
Thank you for inviting me, Katie.
Oh, I got one more. I'm waiting for it to come in. For an organization that is based in Massachusetts, we serve patients and Rhode Islanders. Do you think we'll face any challenges? We have nonprofits that are based in Massachusetts all the time. Participate in 401 Gives. We for sure share borders with Massachusetts a lot. Um, I think that there is a small challenge in asking your Massachusetts-based donors to give to a Rhode Island Giving Day. But what I'll also say is a lot of people in Massachusetts end up coming over to Rhode Island. They enjoy Providence, they enjoy our beaches, they enjoy the East Bay, and so they'll want to engage in Rhode Island services. But also, when it comes to 401 Gives, we have giving days throughout the previous years where we have a donor in all the states across the country. So people love to give to us. They love our tiny little state. And so you may have to target your audiences a little bit more, but I don't see any major red flag challenges. Awesome. Yeah, see, we work in Massachusetts, we live in Rhode Island, it happens all the time. We're basically one big state, really, especially when you look at Attleboro. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Maria Elena, for sharing your wisdom with us. Again, this training will be recorded and posted on the page, as well as emailed out to all of you with the slides. Please, please, please email us with questions that you have. This Giving Day does not exist without the work of you and your organizations. So we will do as much as we can to get that information out to you. So thank you all so, so much and have a great day.